Hey look, it's a new Saint Riot video. Isn't he that guy who does invasions in Elden Ring and casts bubbles with his frog build? Yeah. Isn't he that guy who does plunge attacks and says, verticality? Yeah. But has he ever done both of those things at the same time? Yeah. So, I've been doing something a little different in Elden Ring lately. I have been playing the game as it was intended, with a little bit of a twist, okay? I play these games a lot. So, a lot of the, regular parts of the game are just not very difficult anymore, because I've done them a lot, and I know stuff, right? So, I'm making this build, and this is what it looks like currently, in the moment, at the moment. And I'm playing through the DLC at level 46. Keep in mind that some of the stats you see here, Vigor, Endurance, Strength, and Dex, are all being given 5 extra stats thanks to Radigan's Source Seal. These are the weapons that I am... some of the weapons I'm using, some of the weapons that I will use. And I'm remaking a build that I made, which was like this Bloodborne at home... soft swap build. Since there's no trick weapons in Elden Ring. And these are the weapons that I am using or will be using. But the main thing was fitting the crossbow on the build, the spread crossbow. You might be saying, hey, why do you have that beast claw on this build? And that is just for me. That is just for when I fight bosses, so that I can do the Bloodborne visceral attack, which is like the Bloodborne riposte, but instead of a riposte, you just like reach your hands inside of the thing you're fighting and rip all of their blood out. That's just for me, okay? It doesn't even... It has a different animation in PvP, so I won't even be using it in PvP. I'm just using it on bosses because I think it's funny. But yeah, so I'm playing the game as intended, and what do I mean by that? We're going back to Demon Souls, baby. When you died in Demon Souls, you lost 50% of your max hit points. Okay? That's a lot. There was a ring you could wear that would lower it from 50% down to 30%, but that's still a lot. If you wanted to get your hit points back, you had to go back and retrieve body form. And the way to do that was to use a Stone of Ephemeral Eyes. Dark Souls 2 had a similar mechanic with human effigies and hollowing. You could get down to 50% of your max HP if you died enough times in a row without using a human effigy. And, Dark Souls 3 kind of changed it up and would just give you 30% extra HP if you used the item Ember, right? So, I've got Morgoth's Great Rune on, which gives me, 30% extra HP. And I'm fighting these DLC bosses at level 46, and they're hard, and so they kill me. And then I need more hit points, so I invade, and I get a rune arc, and then I go back and I invade. The intended way, as it was written all those years ago, back in Demon Souls, in the beginning. So these are some of the invasions that I'm getting at level 46. And I have plus 11 weapons, which is a little high for 46. I would say, typically, if you were going to make a build around level 40 or 40, you might want to go, plus 8 weapons. And then, if you went to 50, maybe go up to, plus 10 weapons or something like that. Somewhere in that neighborhood. And then when you get to 60, go up to plus 12 weapons, right? But we're already at plus 11, and we're level 46. And the reason that I've done that is because players will talk to Rajier after, beating Stormveil, and they get a plus 8 rapier or if they're doing the quest for Hyeta, you know, they get a +8 Banished Knight's Halberd. And that puts them in a matchmaking range with +12 weapons. And so I thought, well, let's go to +11 and just see what activity is like. And for a day or two, we kept track, as we were doing these invasions, we kept track of our opponent's character level. We know their weapon level is somewhere between, you know, like +7 and like +16 maybe. And I was curious if we would get a lot of characters, you know, a lot of players who were in their, you know, level 40s. Or maybe low 50s. But we did not. Most everybody that we invaded was level 60. I'm not saying that this is the case, but it almost feels like the weapon level matchmaking takes priority over the character level matchmaking. Like, the game will look for that weapon level first when it's like looking for all the people that you can invade and who you can connect to. It's like it takes the weapon level into consideration before it takes the character level. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that's what it seems like based off of, like, you know, the experience I had invading with +11 weapons at level 40. But yeah, these invasions were just purely to, like, basically give me a rune arc so that I could fight DLC bosses. You know, the dancing thing, Beastman, Rolana, the hippopotamus. Pretty much every one of those bosses took more than one attempt. And I'm trying to remember. Oh, the Death Knight in the catacombs. And I'm not done yet, but you know, like I'm at a point where, like, I could level this character up. This character started as a vagabond. I talked earlier about I was remaking it. The reason I'm remaking it is because of this crossbow. It's such a good blunderbuss stand-in. One of the guns you can get in Bloodborne is the blunderbuss, and this thing is so good at being a blunderbuss. With the Arrow Sting Talisman and the DLC Arrow Talisman, I forget what it's called. Those two, like, with those two talismans on, you kind of have a Bloodborne blood tinge build with the crossbow. If you hit somebody at, like, point blank range, with both of those talismans on, this thing can do, like, real damage, like serious damage. And, you know, I could have put it on the other builds that I made that were like this, but they all started as hero for their starting class. And the reason I did that was because it was basically a joke. I was, you know, hero, as long as you don't level up your dexterity past, like, 11, hero is the most optimal strength build starting class. But who wants to have a strength build that only has, like, 10 dex? But I was going into making that build knowing I was going to be using the Brick Hammer, the Watchdog Greatsword, and the Giant Crusher. And all of those weapons are, you know, like 10 strength or less. I'm sorry, 10 dex or less. And so I was like, I don't need any dex at all. And for once in my life, I can actually make an Elden Ring build that's, like, fully optimal. I love the Watchdog Greatsword, but the problem is, like, on paper, it's better than the Guts Greatsword for a strength build because it doesn't require 14 dex. So that's more points that you can just pump into strength. But the problem is that, like, in practice, it's longer. It's got extra range. Who doesn't have, like, that much dex? Like, who doesn't have that? It's so easy to get it. So, like, the Guts Greatsword just completely outclasses the Watchdog Greatsword for the most part. unless you make a build that's only going to have 10 decks, and then the Watchdog Greatsword, like that's your pick, right? So I was basically just making a build that was like, okay, this is like the optimal Watchdog Greatsword build. And the Brick Hammer and the Giant Crusher, all of those you can use with the 10 decks as well. So for this build, I went Vagabond instead, because we need a little bit of dex to use this crossbow. And like I said, you could slap on a dex talisman or something to use the crossbow on the hero build. But I'm like, who wants to do that? Who wants to give up, a talisman slot for 5 points that you're only using for, like, this crossbow? So I thought, I'll just make a Vagabond. I really liked this build. I get to use a straight sword, a colossal sword, a great sword, a great hammer. I get to use all my favorite stuff. So I really don't mind remaking the build, and I'll remake it as a Vagabond this time. And that way I can use the crossbow and it can still be, optimal, right? The weapons that you see are cold infused, and you might be asking yourself, why are they cold infused? You don't have any intelligence. But I do have intelligence in the real world, and that's why they are cold infused. So the lower level infusion is typically fire, right? You go fire infused for strength, and you go lightning infusion for dex. But Elden Ring has so much, there's so much water, and you are constantly invading people in Liurnia, and it's full of water. And when people when you fight people in water, they get extra fire resistance. They lose lightning resistance, but they gain extra fire resistance. And so knowing that, I went cold infused, which gives me magic damage, frostbite, and I still get decent scaling with the regular stats of the weapon. So like this Y-hander still has good dex scaling. The Lordsworn still has decent strength and dex scaling. And that way I can, I don't have to worry about the water and the fire damage and all that. It's not a bad idea to have a little, fire weapon on you, have a couple fire weapons on you, and then after you've, proc frostbite, you can use fire or whatever if you want. If you're not fighting in water, you can use the fire weapons. But instead, I go to the Gelmir Merchant, and I buy explosive bolts that does fire damage, and I go to the Atlas Merchant, and I buy lightning ballista bolts, and so once I frostbite people, I can shoot them with the lightning ballista bolts and do some extra damage, and that's nice. And then if I want to reset the frostbite, I can use the explosive bolts, and that's also nice. So I can, keep resetting the frostbite on players or bosses, either one, which is pretty fun. So it works out well, despite the fact that you might not necessarily think of frostbite or the cold infusion as a strength infusion. It's actually pretty good. It also works pretty good as a quality infusion as well, as long as the weapons you're using mainly benefit from the stats that you have, right? So, you use the Lordsworn, and it has like a CC scaling, and then if you sharp infuse it, it gets a B in dex, or if you heavy infuse it, it gets a B in strength. If you cold infuse it, it keeps like the C or the D, I think. Yeah, it keeps the D scale for strength and dex, right? So if you wanted to really, if you were going to do this with a strength build, the broadsword would probably be the choice for straight sword in terms of numbers. And then after that, maybe the longsword. But yeah, that's the thought process. This invasion is the most... it was so crazy that I was joking about, oh yeah, I'm doing this as intended. I'm invading when I need my rune arc to give me extra health so I can fight the tough bosses. That's the intended mechanic of invasions, right? And I'm fighting all these people who are just lake gankers and duelists and, just the dumbest possible people in the world. Trying to have duels at level 40 or 50 at Liurnia using like the super try-hard meta setup. And then I get this invasion. That Phantom's build was insane in the best possible way. And I'm invading, trying to get a rune arc. That Phantom stays behind and fights me long enough to let his host get to the boss. Like, he sacrificed himself, basically. You know? Like, he didn't know he could win that, right? He was willing to sacrifice himself to get his host to the boss. And the host took that opportunity to get to the boss. That is the most intended ass gameplay Elden Ring has ever seen. An invader who needed a rune arc, a Phantom who sacrificed themselves for the benefit of the host, and a host who, rather than sit back and try and gank, just tried to make progress. Absolutely a mind-blowing amount of intended gameplay going on right there. And it's insane. Absolutely insane. So anyway, my point is, this has been a lot of fun. Some of these invasions, the ones that I've recorded here, a lot of them are the invasions where you're like, oh my god, you know, these people are the worst. But that's just, it makes good content, right? The actual experience itself of doing this, and a lot of the invasions that you haven't seen in this video, you know, they were really fun. They were really good. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm not done doing it yet. But I'm to a point where, like, I think I want to level this build up and kind of get him away from the Soar Seal, and give him, you know, real stats and stuff. I gave myself 12 faith so that I could try out the fire guy greatsword, because I haven't tried it out yet. And this is one that you do want to fire infuse, right? And so, yeah, I'm fire infusing this one. But it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You know, you get the Zweihander pokes, you get the Godslayer moveset, and you know, it can do fire stuff. Now, for Ashes of War, I always go quick step because that's like the Bloodborne thing. But I might get away from that and replace my Radigan's Soar Seal with the fine Crucible Feather so that I can have backsteps with iframes and try and rely on those. That will be in another video after I get this build all finished and everything. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you've never done this, a lot of people think of invasions as like this, oh, you make a build for your invader, and then you go and you invade with your invader. Yes, that's fine. That's absolutely fine, and a lot of people do that, and, you know, it can be fun. But if you've never done this, the quote-unquote intended gameplay of invading so that you can get that rune arc, so that you can beat the tough boss and make progress, it's been a ton of fun. It's been a blast. Rather than going into the invasions with a completely finished build, I'm going into the invasions with this build that's not quite done yet, that still has some work that it needs to do. And I have loved it. It's something that I guess we don't think about a lot when you make videos and you're like, yeah, I made this build, and now here's me doing invasions with this build that I made. I'm Saint Riot. You kind of get away from the roots, the origins of the mechanic, and you know, that's something that I always harp about when people complain about PvP in these games. Is like, you know, you're weird. You're doing it the weird way. You're not doing it the way, nobody's sitting at From Software balancing it so that you can do this for 8 hours a day and this is what you do. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not the game that they envisioned when they made this game, and you are trying to play it like it is that, right? And so, to sort of illustrate that point, I have been doing this playthrough. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. If you've never done it this way and you like invading, you should definitely try it. If you've never done it this way and you don't like invading, you should still try it because it's fun. And another thing is, you know, if you wanted to, you could mix in some co-op while you do that. You know, put your summon sign down. Help somebody fight a boss. Help them fight a boss, you get a rune arc. And now you have a rune arc. And maybe you even have a friend. Maybe they'll put their summon sign down for you so that you can beat the boss at like a lower level, you know, than maybe you're comfortable with or, you know, accustomed to doing. You know, just keep in mind that when you do these low-level type things, most people aren't doing them with you, right? Elden Ring is really weird. Elden Ring came out, and everybody who bought the game who wasn't already a Souls fan had this like MMORPG mindset, which is just really bizarre. I have no idea why that happened, but everybody's just, you know, they want to have the most levels. You know, there are people who won't touch the game until they're level 200. They'll go to Moog's little thing and kill the bird, and they'll be max level before they actually like really engage with the game, because they think that you know, like, is giving them an advantage, which I guess it is, but like not a lot, honestly. If you're trying to play through the game solo, stats will only carry you so far. And that was one of the funny things about Radon when the DLC came out, was like, you see all these people and it's like, those stats are, you know, you can be level 200 in base new game fighting Radon, and those stats are only going to carry you so far if you don't actually know how to play the game. But my point is, don't expect to see a lot of summon signs if you go through the DLC at level 50. That's what I'm saying. But, you know, you could do, like, the base game type stuff. I'm doing the DLC because I play these games all the time, and, like, that's where the challenge is at for someone as dumb as me. But, yeah, it's been a ton of fun. You should try it. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time. Later, y'all.